It was the eve of the grand ball at Castle Verdancia, the most anticipated event of the season. Princess Alara stood by her window, gazing at the moonlit gardens below. Her father, King Alistair, had organized the ball to celebrate her 17th birthday. But something about the night felt wrong. A sense of unease gnawed at her, like a shadow lurking in the corners of her mind. It wasn't just the strange dreams she'd been having lately, dreams of dark forests and whispering voices. No, something far more sinister seemed to be stirring. Earlier that evening, a mysterious invitation had arrived. Unlike the usual ornate scrolls sealed with wax, this one was different. Black parchment, sealed with a deep crimson mark. Alara's heart had raced as she opened it, expecting to find some cryptic warning or a declaration of doom. But the words inside were simple. You are invited to a night of destiny. Beware what lurks beneath the mask. It was unsigned, and when she asked her maid, Isabella, about it, the girl had gone pale and hurried away, mumbling about how she had seen no one deliver it. The oddness of it all gnawed at Alara, especially since her dreams had been filled with masked figures, watching her from the shadows. As the evening deepened and the preparations for the ball continued, Alara couldn't shake the sense of dread. The hallways of the castle felt longer, darker. The paintings of her ancestors seemed to watch her more closely than before, their eyes following her every step. She brushed it off as nerves. After all, it was her birthday, and the entire kingdom would be watching her tonight. But deep down, she knew something was coming. Something dangerous. The grand ballroom of Castle Verdancia was a sight to behold that night. Golden chandeliers glittered overhead, casting a warm glow over the sea of guests who twirled in their finery. Musicians played lively tunes, and laughter echoed across the hall. Yet, amid the grandeur, Alara felt oddly out of place. Her gown, a shimmering silver masterpiece, seemed to weigh her down as if it were made of lead. Each step felt heavier than the last as she descended the staircase into the ballroom, her father beside her. King Alistair's booming voice welcomed the crowd, but his words seemed distant to Alara. She scanned the room, searching for anything or anyone out of the ordinary. The masked faces danced before her, glittering masks of gold, ivory, and emerald. Everyone was disguised, as tradition dictated for the royal masquerade, but it didn't help her unease. Who was hiding behind those masks? And what were their intentions? Alara, my dear, relax, her father said, noticing the tension in her posture. Tonight is for you. Enjoy yourself. But Alara couldn't relax. Not when she noticed the tall figure standing near the entrance, watching her intently. His mask was unlike the others, jet black, with sharp edges and red markings that almost looked like they were painted with blood. His gaze was fixed on her unwavering. Alara's heart quickened. She looked away, trying to focus on the lively chatter around her, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. When she looked back at the entrance, the masked man was gone. Hours passed, and Alara found herself mingling with the nobles, exchanging pleasantries, and dancing with suitors who hoped to win her favor. But the sense of unease remained. She couldn't forget the invitation, or the strange man who had disappeared so quickly. Her instincts told her to leave the ballroom, to run far from whatever danger was lurking, but she couldn't. The eyes of the kingdom were on her, and she had a duty to fulfill. As midnight approached, the atmosphere in the ballroom shifted. The music slowed, and the laughter grew softer. Alara could feel it, the change in the air, the tension building like a storm waiting to break. Her father had stepped away to speak with the kingdom's advisors, leaving her momentarily alone. That's when she felt a cold hand brush against her arm. Alara turned sharply, her breath catching in her throat. It was him, the man in the black mask. He stood close, too close, his dark eyes gleaming behind the mask. Princess Alara, he said in a low voice, his breath warm against her ear. You've been expecting me? Her heart pounded. She hadn't expected him, not really. But his words sent a chill down her spine. Who are you? She demanded, taking a step back. She glanced around the ballroom, but no one seemed to notice their interaction. It was as if they were in their own world, surrounded by masked dancers, but utterly isolated. The man tilted his head, his lips curving into a slight smile. You already know the answer to that. Alara's mind raced. She didn't know him, or did she? There was something familiar about his voice, something that tugged at the edges of her memory. The dreams, the invitation, the warnings whispered in the night. What do you want? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's smile faded, replaced by something colder, darker. You, and the destiny that awaits you. Before she could respond, a sudden pain shot through her body. Alara gasped, her hand flying to her chest. The room spun around her, the music distorting into a dissonant hum. Her vision blurred as she staggered backward, her legs giving out beneath her. The last thing she saw before darkness consumed her was the man in the black mask, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Alara woke to darkness. At first, she thought she was still dreaming, trapped in the nightmare that had haunted her for weeks. But as the cold stone beneath her fingers and the damp air filling her lungs became clearer, she realized this was no dream. She was lying on a stone floor, her body aching from head to toe. Every breath felt like a struggle, as though something heavy was pressing down on her chest. Panic surged through her as she tried to move, but her limbs felt weak and uncoordinated. Where was she? The last thing she remembered was the man in the black mask and the unbearable pain that had consumed her. Had she been poisoned? Kidnapped? Her mind raced with questions, but there were no answers in the silence that surrounded her. Slowly, she pushed herself up, wincing as her muscles protested. The room was pitch black, save for a faint, flickering light in the distance. She could just make out the outline of iron bars in front of her. A prison. Alara's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the truth. She was locked in a cell, deep beneath the castle, or perhaps far from it. She had no way of knowing how much time had passed since the ball, or how she had ended up here. Her first instinct was to scream for help, but she knew it would be futile. Whoever had taken her had gone to great lengths to ensure she was hidden away. There would be no rescue unless she found a way out herself. Gathering her strength, she crawled toward the faint light, her fingers brushing against cold stone and rusted metal. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she saw that the flickering light was coming from a torch mounted on the far wall, outside the cell. And standing just beyond the torchlight was a figure. Alara froze, her heart skipping a beat. The figure was cloaked in shadows, but she could make out the shape of a tall man, his face obscured by darkness. She knew, without a doubt, that it was him, the man in the black mask. You're awake, his voice echoed in the small space, smooth and unhurried. Good. Alara's fear gave way to anger. What have you done to me? Why am I here? The man stepped closer, just enough for the torchlight to illuminate his mask. It was still the same, dark and ominous, but now there was something more unsettling about it. The red markings seemed to pulse, as though they were alive, feeding off the shadows that surrounded him. You've been poisoned, princess, he said, his tone almost casual. But don't worry. It's not lethal. Yet. Alara's blood ran cold. What do you mean? He tilted his head, studying her with an almost amused expression. The poison coursing through your veins is special. It was designed specifically for you. To keep you alive, but only just long enough for you to fulfill your destiny. What destiny? Alara spat, her fists clenched. I don't believe in your lies. I don't know who you are or what you want, but I will not be a part of whatever game you're playing. The man chuckled softly. You don't have a choice. The poison binds you to me now. You will soon learn that there's no escaping your fate, princess. Alara's heart pounded, but she refused to show weakness. Who are you? She demanded again, her voice shaking with anger. Why are you doing this? The man leaned closer, his eyes gleaming behind the mask. You will learn in time. For now, rest. You'll need your strength for what's to come. And with that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Alara alone in the cold, dark cell. But as he vanished, a new fear took root in her heart. The poison wasn't just in her body. It was in her mind, Essie. For oh, you said, eeping into her thoughts, warping her sense of reality. She could feel it, like an invisible chain tightening around her, tugging her towards some unknown fate. Alara slumped against the cold stone wall, her mind racing. The poison. The man had said it wasn't lethal, at least not yet. But what did that mean? Was she on borrowed time, with her body slowly succumbing to the venom coursing through her veins? Or was there something more sinister at play? And what had he meant by destiny? The word echoed in her head like a curse. She had to get out of here. There had to be a way. Alara scanned the cell, looking for anything she could use to her advantage. The iron bars of the cell door looked old, rusted at the joints. If she could find something to pry them loose, she might have a chance. But the only objects in the cell were her own trembling hands and the rough stone floor. Panic rose in her throat, but she pushed it down. She couldn't give in to fear, not now. She had to stay focused. The figure of the masked man haunted her thoughts. Who was he? Why had he targeted her? No one in the kingdom had ever mentioned a threat like this. Could he be from another kingdom, someone seeking revenge against her father? Or was he part of something older, darker, something tied to the strange dreams she had been having for weeks now? She needed answers. Just then, she heard the faint sound of footsteps approaching. Her breath caught in her throat as she listened. They were slow, deliberate, growing louder with each passing second. Alara scrambled back to the farthest corner of the cell, her heart pounding in her chest. A figure appeared at the edge of the torchlight once more, but this time it wasn't the man in the black mask. It was a woman, dressed in a long dark cloak, her face half hidden by the hood. She carried a tray of food, simple bread, water, and some kind of stew that smelled faintly of herbs. Her steps were quiet, and she seemed almost ethereal, as if she could disappear into the shadows at any moment. The woman paused just outside the cell, her gaze lifting to meet Alara's. For a moment, the two of them stared at each other in silence. Then the woman knelt and slid the tray through a small opening in the bars. "You must eat," she said softly, her voice gentle but firm. "You'll need your strength." Alara narrowed her eyes. "Who are you? Why are you helping him?" The woman's eyes flickered with something like sadness, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she straightened up and stood there, her hands folded in front of her, as if she were guarding some unspoken secret. "I cannot tell you everything," she said finally. "But know this. You are in grave danger, princess. More than you realize. There are forces at work here that are far older and darker than you could ever imagine. The poison that flows through your veins is only the beginning." Alara's blood turned cold. "Then help me," she pleaded. "Help me escape." The woman glanced down the corridor, her expression torn. For a brief moment, Alara thought she might actually agree to help. But then the woman shook her head slowly. "I cannot," she whispered. "Not yet. But I will give you this." From within her cloak, the woman pulled out a small vial filled with a shimmering liquid. She passed it through the bars to Alara, who stared at it unsure. "What is this?" Alara asked, holding the vial up to the dim torchlight. The liquid inside glowed faintly, like stardust captured in a bottle. "A temporary antidote," the woman replied. "It will slow the effects of the poison, but it won't cure you. You'll need to find the real antidote before the poison reaches your heart." Alara's pulse quickened. "Where is it? How do I find it?" The woman hesitated. "The antidote lies in the heart of the Black Forest, guarded by creatures who do not take kindly to intruders. It will be a dangerous journey, princess, but it's the only way." Alara clutched the vial tightly. The Black Forest was a place of legend, a vast and treacherous woodland said to be filled with dark magic and ancient creatures. No one who ventured into its depths ever returned. It was a death sentence. But what choice did she have? If she stayed here, the poison would kill her, slowly and painfully. If she didn't find the antidote, there would be no future for her at all. Before Alara could ask more, the woman took a step back. "He's coming," she whispered urgently. "You must be strong. There are those who would see you fail, but there are others who still believe in you. Trust in yourself, princess. And remember, things are not always what they seem." With that, the woman disappeared into the shadows, leaving Alara alone once more. Minutes later, the masked man returned. He stood in the doorway of the cell, his dark eyes gleaming behind the mask, as if he could sense the tension in the air. Alara quickly hid the vial beneath her dress, her heart racing. "I trust you've had time to think," he said, his voice smooth and mocking. "Your destiny awaits, princess." Alara lifted her chin, refusing to let him see her fear. "Whatever you think my destiny is, you're wrong. I won't play your game." The man tilted his head slightly, amusement dancing in his eyes. "You don't have a choice." As he stepped forward, closer to the cell door, the torchlight flickered once again, casting eerie shadows across his mask. For a moment, Alara thought she saw something move beneath the mask, something dark and alive, writhing like smoke or shadows. But then it was gone, and the man's smile widened. "Your time is running out, Alara. Soon, the poison will take hold, and when it does, you'll beg for the fate I offer you." He turned and began to walk away, his footsteps echoing in the corridor. As he disappeared into the darkness, Alara clutched the vial tighter, her mind racing. The Black Forest, the antidote, the danger that awaited her outside these stone walls. But one thing was clear: she couldn't stay here and wait for death. She had to escape, and she had to do it soon. Her fate, whatever it was, would be decided in the shadows of the Black Forest. And if she was to survive, she would need more than just courage. She would need to unravel the mystery of the poison, the man behind the mask, and the truth of her own destiny before it was too late. The following hours were the longest of Alara's life. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity as she sat in the dark cell, waiting for the right moment to make her move. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she could feel the poison working its way through her veins, a constant reminder that time was slipping away. She had no idea how she was going to escape. The cell was secure, and the man in the black mask would surely have guards posted nearby. But she couldn't wait any longer. If she stayed, she would die. Alara studied the rusted bars again. They were old, and she thought she could loosen one if she had the right tool. But where would she find one? That's when she remembered the tray of food. Crawling over to it, she picked up the bowl of stew and turned it over, looking for anything useful. At the bottom of the bowl was a small spoon, metal, tarnished but sturdy. It wasn't much, but it was something. She grabbed the spoon and went to work on the bars, prying at the rusted joints as quietly as she could. Every sound seemed louder in the silence of the dungeon, and she paused several times, listening for footsteps. After what felt like hours, one of the bars gave way with a loud creak. Her heart raced as she pulled the bar free, the cold metal scraping against the stone. It wasn't a large opening, but it was big enough for her to squeeze through. Taking a deep breath, Alara slipped out of the cell and into the corridor beyond. Her escape had begun. Alara's heart pounded in her ears as she crouched in the shadowy corridor outside her cell. The dungeon was eerily silent, except for the faint drip of water echoing through the stone halls. She glanced around, half expecting the man in the black mask to materialize from the darkness at any moment. But the corridor remained empty. She couldn't stay here long. The vial of temporary antidote weighed heavily in her pocket, a constant reminder that her time was running out. She didn't know how much of the poison had already seeped into her bloodstream, but the occasional sharp pain in her chest told her she didn't have much longer. Alara moved cautiously down the hallway, keeping to the shadows. The air was damp and cold, and the faint torchlight barely illuminated the stone walls. She had no idea where the exit was, but she knew she had to find a way out of the dungeon and into the castle above. Once she was free, she could head for the Black Forest. If she survived that long. The thought sent a chill down her spine, but she pushed it aside. There was no time for fear. She had to focus on escaping. Rounding a corner, Alara nearly stumbled into a guard. He stood with his back to her, unaware of her presence. She froze, her pulse racing. She didn't have a weapon, and though the guard wasn't particularly large, she couldn't risk being caught. Her eyes darted to the wall beside her, where an old rusted candelabra hung, one of its metal arms cracked and bent. Slowly, Alara reached up, gripping the broken piece. She tugged it free as quietly as she could, the metal groaning slightly as it came loose. The guard shifted, as if sensing something was wrong. Without thinking, Alara lunged, bringing the jagged metal down hard against the back of his head. He grunted, staggering forward, and collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Alara stared at him, her chest heaving. She had never hurt anyone before, but there was no time to dwell on it now. She dragged the guard's body into the shadows, hiding him behind a stack of barrels, then quickly searched him for anything useful. She found a small dagger strapped to his belt and tucked it into the waistband of her gown. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. Silently, she continued down the corridor, moving faster now. Every second felt like a countdown, the poison creeping closer to her heart. Her limbs ached, and there was a heaviness in her chest that made it harder to breathe. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to push through the pain. She couldn't give up, not now, not when she was so close. Finally, after what felt like hours, she reached a narrow stairwell leading upward. The air grew warmer as she ascended, the scent of fresh air mixing with the stale dampness of the dungeon. Alara's heart leaped in her chest. She was getting closer to the surface. But as she reached the top of the stairs, her hope faltered. 2 guards stood at the entrance to the main castle, their swords gleaming in the low light. They were alert, their eyes scanning the hallway. There was no way she could slip past them unnoticed. Her heart sank. If she fought them, she risked drawing attention, and she was in no shape to take on 2 trained soldiers. Her hand tightened around the hilt of the dagger. Maybe if she was fast enough, she could take them by surprise. But even as the thought crossed her mind, she knew it was a gamble. One wrong move, and she'd be captured again, or worse. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind her. Panic surged through her veins. Someone was coming. Without thinking, Alara ducked into a nearby alcove, pressing herself against the wall. Her breath came in shallow gasps as the footsteps grew closer. She could hear voices now, 2 people, speaking in low, urgent tones. "I don't care what he told you," one of the voices said, rough and agitated. "We need to find her before she escapes. The Master won't tolerate failure." Alara's blood ran cold. They were looking for her. The second voice, softer but no less dangerous, responded, "The Master knows exactly where she is. He's just waiting for her to make her move. He always does." There was a pause, then the first voice cursed under his breath. "I don't like it. We should have locked her in the lower chambers. It's too risky leaving her in the main dungeon." The voices grew louder as the 2 men passed by the alcove, their footsteps heavy on the stone floor. Alara held her breath, pressing herself further into the shadows. She didn't dare move, not even as they passed so close she could feel the brush of their cloaks against the air. "We'll check the eastern wing," one of them said. "If she's not there, we'll report back." Alara waited until their footsteps faded into the distance before she exhaled, her whole body trembling. They were searching the castle for her. She didn't have much time. Gathering her courage, Alara crept back toward the entrance, where the 2 guards still stood, oblivious to the danger lurking just around the corner. She had no choice now. She had to act. With a burst of determination, Alara flung the dagger toward the first guard. The blade struck true, hitting him square in the shoulder. He cried out in pain, staggering backward. The second guard turned, his eyes widening in shock, but Alara was already moving. She charged forward, grabbing the fallen guard's sword and swinging it with all her strength. The second guard barely had time to react before the blade sliced across his chest, sending him crumpling to the ground.